You know, there really comes a time where Electronic Arts probably should just stop talking. Whoever, or well, if there is anyone working in the public relations department at EA, you probably should just leave the company because it's really just a lost cause at this point. EA's reputation was a bag of garbage, but now it's more like a landfill. A landfill full of your dog's special surprises. As most of you know, Star Wars Battlefront 2 is a controversial mess thanks to Electronic Arts' greedy practices that backfired on them. Honestly, you probably could make a book or a movie about this whole debacle at this point, but anyway, since Disney intervened and had EA temporarily turn off microtransactions, there have been some very questionable comments coming from EA's upper management. Specifically this guy, Blake Jorgensen, EA's CFO, who really is just saying the exact opposite of what fans want to hear. Jorgensen's questionable comments started when he gave their reason for pulling microtransactions in Star Wars Battlefront 2 temporarily. He said, quote unquote, "We pulled off on the microtransactions because the real issue the consumer had was that they felt it was a pay-to-win mechanic. The reality is there are different types of players in games. Some people have more time than money, and some people have more money than time. You want to always balance those two." Jorgensen also would add that this was a good learning experience, although I kind of find it odd that a company that's been around 30 plus years and involved in probably hundreds of controversies at this point did not expect consumers to get angry about a game that was built on manipulating players into coughing up some extra cash. Well, actually, the answer is EA doesn't care what we think, they care about what we'll pay them. Now, if you thought these comments were something, well, Jorgensen recently gave us a better understanding of why Visceral's Uncharted-like Star Wars game got canned, and it's, well, textbook EA. Jorgensen said this about Visceral's linear Star Wars game, quote unquote, "As we kept reviewing the game, it continued to look like a much more linear game which people don't like as much today as they did 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Okay, well, his comments continue with him saying this about the decision to shut down Visceral, and pivot the game's design, saying it was an economic decision at the end of the day, and that they probably let this go a little further than they should or usually have. Jorgensen elaborated a little bit more by saying that he thought about how many copies the game would have to sell, and he determined that EA probably wouldn't be able to reach that unspecified mark. Jorgensen finished his thoughts with, "You gotta cut the bridge when you realize you can't make a lot of money on something." These comments from Jorgensen sound very different than what EA said when Visceral initially was shut down in October. The Electronic Arts CEO Andrew Wilson said the following: "You may have heard the conversation around single player versus multiplayer or single player versus live service. The decision to close Visceral and shift the focus of their Star Wars game wasn't about that conversation. It wasn't about this was just a single player game and it needed to be a live service. It was more about how do we get to the point where the overall gameplay experience was right for players. We still believe strongly in the Star Wars IP." Clearly, from these new comments coming from Blake Jorgensen, it does seem that this being just a single player game for EA was a problem, and that's in large part due to their mission to have microtransactions and monetization schemes in almost every single game they put out. The truth is, Electronic Arts no longer cares to just deliver a $60 game. They're thinking bigger because they want people buying day one DLC, they want people opening loot crates or card packs, they want people buying special or deluxe editions. Every available route to make more than $60 off of each consumer is EA's mission. People don't often talk about it, but EA sports games are killing it right now with microtransactions. It was recently revealed that 70 to 75% of all the people that buy EA sports games, which consists of Madden and FIFA, join Ultimate Team, and of those 75%, about half of those people actually spend money on microtransactions. Considering that FIFA 17 was the best-selling console title in the world last year, with an estimated 16 million shipped copies, at least 4.5 million people have purchased microtransactions yearly. Back in 2016, once again Blake Jorgensen pretty much told us that they want the Ultimate Team-like system in their non-sports games. He said, quote unquote, "We are thinking about how do we replicate the Ultimate Team style gameplay in non-sports games, and that may ultimately yield some very interesting opportunities across our franchises. We are less focused on microtransactions, and we want to be careful not to nickel and dime the consumer. We like the notion of how to drive deep engagement, and when we deeply engage you, you will spend money over time. We like to think about that as the model versus simply a microtransactions model. This is the exact problem with Electronic Arts. Manipulating players into buying card packs and Ultimate Team is the new normal, and that's exactly what EA is trying to do with other franchises. A linear Star Wars game or even a single player only Star Wars game does not fit their book, and if you can only make $60, then it's just not worth it for Electronic Arts. Reportedly, Visceral's Star Wars game has been completely scrapped, with some of the assets made being retained. What we will eventually we get is a multiplayer/single player game because EA relies on the microtransactions. With EA currently having the Star Wars license, we will not be getting an Uncharted like Star Wars or even a Witcher 3 like Star Wars game because EA does not want to bring these type of games to players. They want more Star Wars Battlefront 2 like games. Respawn is said to be next in line, and say what you want, but EA owns them now, and I find it hard to believe that there won't be microtransactions or any monetization schemes, which is really unfortunate because Respawn was a really promising studio. What Blake Jorgensen has said about fans not wanting a linear Uncharted like Star Wars game is rubbish, and a defense that tries to justify EA's mission to only make games as a service. If Electronic Arts spent the time and money with BioWare on making Knights of the Old Republic 3 and did not incorporate any slimy microtransactions, I find it hard to believe that it wouldn't sell at least 10 million copies. But the problem with that is EA preferably wants to have recurrent consumer spending, something that has worked very well for another publisher called Take-Two Interactive with Grand Theft Auto Online. They don't want consumers just sitting down and playing a game for a number of hours. They want us to open up our wallets even more, which is why Visceral's Star Wars game did not work for them and never will. Single-player games in general are profitable. Games like The Witcher 3 and Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild show that. Linear games like BioShock Infinite and Doom can be profitable as well, but it really depends on what is put together. Saying fans don't want linear games is just a lie to fit EA's narrative, but I will say so far EA has not put together anything other than multiplayer-focused Star Wars games. There is an audience waiting for a single-player focused Star Wars game, and with Visceral's project being canned, we may have to wait until the mid-2020s to get that. Also, it's very likely it will not be coming from Electronic Arts. At the end of the day, these comments are more about EA's approach to making games nowadays. They can try and say that the Uncharted-like action-adventure Star Wars game Visceral was putting together wasn't shut down because it was single-player linear, but it was. The exact reason being that there are less ways to make money off of something like that. EA can say people don't want linear games as much. Even if that was true, why haven't we seen a single-player focused Star Wars game yet from them? The answer is that EA prefers to just market a game like Star Wars Battlefront 2 as a single-player experience, when in fact it's just a 5-hour mediocre story that's only there to get people to buy the game and then turn their attention to the multiplayer, where EA really wants you to open up your wallet. The one thing that I'm left pondering is why, if Electronic Arts had a problem with Visceral's game being more linear, did they even let them do the project in the first place? From all the leaks that we talked about earlier this year regarding this project Ragtag, this has been known for a very long time what type of game was being made by them. I think it just boils down to EA didn't see any opportunities to incorporate a monetization scheme. They've become a company that could care less about the craft, which is clear with the reviews of their Star Wars and recent games, but even with these games not being all that well liked, they've been bringing in boatloads of money. EA has no reason to take a chance and invest time on a linear Star Wars game because money is all they care about. So until gamers stop making in-game purchases, EA will not change, and unfortunately most of the players who aren't really in the know when it comes to these issues are the core reason why we'll keep getting Star Wars Battlefront 2 type games. Anyway guys, what do you think about EA saying consumers don't want linear games anymore? Let me know in the comment section below. Also, make sure to smack that like button if you did enjoy this video or found any informative value, and consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.